Let's go into metals a little bit more. I would love to talk a little bit about it. Okay. Beyond the damage that toxic metals themselves can do, there's the truth that they act as viral fuel. So you got to understand something. It's critical to get metals out. Critical. Somebody may not have a lot of viral issues or viral load. They might not have a low-grade viral infection. They might not have a high-grade viral infection. They may not have a big viral load, but they got a lot of metals. And then all of a sudden, one day happens where they pick up a virus and it all just explodes on them. I was healthy. I was doing good. I don't understand. And they're backtracking in their mind. I remember when I was healthy, I was doing fine. And then they're doing their affirmations and they're talking to themselves and then they're talking to their practitioners and their doctors and they're like, you don't understand. I was just fine the other week and now I'm sick. I was just fine months ago. A year ago, I was fine. I was doing good and now I'm sick. Why? Nobody knows it. They were loaded with metals and then something happened. Either they contracted a virus or they just had a virus come out of dormancy because their immune system got lowered for some reason or another. And the virus came out and it gobbled up the metals and boom, overnight they had the worst sensations and the worst symptoms, the brain fog and the aches and pains and the tingles and numbness and the neurological sensations and the trigeminal neuralgia and so much more. And they're struggling because it was the perfect recipe, the perfect storm. It was the bug eating the metals at just the right time. And that's it. They went down. And now they're living a life where it's all about their health and only about their health. And they just weren't there before. They don't know what that's like and they never experienced that before. I want to read a little bit something to you real quick, if that's okay. If you guys will let me do that. Okay. Melting down. When our brains get hot and there's metal involved, because that's what happens. We're loaded with all these metals and it becomes an alloy, right? The toxic heavy metal particles break down. The metals melt. They actually melt inside our brain. Toxic heavy metals in the brain get wear and tear. When electricity currents are entering them, they start to change. Did you ever notice somebody changing? Did you ever see somebody change? Like you don't even know who they are. Like, I don't even know who you are, man. Like, I've known you for years, but something's just changing about you. What is it? Like, I don't even, like, who are you? Who are you? Now, this you could see in somebody that has Alzheimer's, right? This you can see with somebody who has dementia. You could really see it then because it's just so obvious. And you're just like, whoa, something's wrong. And that's from toxic heavy metals. And that's original medical meme information. But it's from toxic heavy metals causing the Alzheimer's, right? And dementia. But what happens is if you're not diagnosed with Alzheimer's and it's not so apparent and it's not so visible and it's not on that scale at all, it's not about losing your memory, it's not about going into some kind of mania, it's not about any of that. It's just about everyday living in life and you're just like, why is that? What? That person's changing. What is it about them? A lot of times that's metals that have melted and they have melted together and they're forging and they're changing. And that's what that is. Metals that have forged together, their shapes change. So metals that enter our body or have been in our body since we were born end up changing over time. Corrosion can occur as well. The metals corrode. We're talking about heavy metal detox. I want to talk about like blood testing for metals. I want to talk about urine samples for metals, right? All right. Because that's important too. The metal goes in. The metal particles go in. Okay? They go in a certain shape and size. Industrial metals that go into us all the time in so many various ways. Did you have fast food? Metals were in it. That's just one thing. But what happens is metals tend to melt as we have electricity running through our brain and electrical impulses are hitting the metal particles and they tend to melt. When they melt, they change shape and all of a sudden they have a different shape to them. They're not the same shape anymore. They came in kind of off shape in a different way, but now they've changed. All the shapes have changed. And when that does happen, we change. When the shape of the metal changes that has entered our body because it's melting, we change. You can't really tell at first with a lot of people, but then you can tell later. Or if someone hasn't seen somebody in a long time and then they see them and they see how different they are in different various ways, there's a changing that occurred. All right, so I want to look a little more into this. Another reason brain conditions worsen with time is that more toxic heavy metals continue to collect. And this is the next part I want to say right here. So you got these metals right there in you, and then more metals come in every day, every year, and they come in and they find their way and they collect. They bind on to the metals that are already in you. Deposits in the brain can get bigger. So as more metals stream in like this, they find the metal deposits and then they actually enlarge. The metal starts to accumulate. More metal occurs and grows because the more metal going into the body, actually it goes and finds the other metal in your body. They both join hands and now you're getting metal deposits. And if somebody has a big metal deposit, if someone has a really big one, you better believe it. So many people do. They got big metal deposits. Seizures. Big metal deposits. Okay? So if someone has a big deposit in their brain, or two big deposits in their brain, okay? And maybe a smaller one, and more metals are coming in, they find these big deposits. These deposits get bigger. 10 years down the road, the deposit's even bigger. 20 years, it's even bigger. You're 50 years old now, the deposits are bigger because you're not getting metals out. You're not taking care of yourself on that level. Nobody's teaching you. Nobody knows. Or if you hear about metals now, you'll be like, let me try zeolite. It doesn't work. Or let me try this. It doesn't work. Or let me try something else. It doesn't work. You don't get the metals out. It's smoke and mirrors. It's critical. Metals come out. There's no games. No time for games. No time for BS. The metals have to come out. Can't do make-believe crap where you all of a sudden this is good for metals, somebody says, and this is good for metals, and somebody says out there, because it's like an industry. It's everybody's just eating each other alive out there to try to make a buck, right? But we got to take it serious with the chronically ill because there ain't no time left for a lot of people who are sick because they've been sick for so long. They have to get the stuff out of their system so they can live their life. The more metal that goes in us, it hits the big deposits that create seizures, say, or just sickness of all kinds, or severe chronic fatigue, or whatever it is, because it's feeding viruses. As more metal comes in, the deposits get bigger and they swell. Sometimes they'll get so big that neurons start to short circuit. So as your neurons, right, in your brain, all these neurons, I'm going to draw a few neurons right here. You guys okay with that? If you're not caught up to what I'm doing, you just rolled in here. These are big, heavy metal deposits right here, these three deposits, inside of our brain, okay? More metal coming in is making them bigger. Your neurons, which are these, I'm going to string them together. You're okay with that? Stringing these neurons together, just for fun. Okay? What happens is these deposits get so big, they impede the neuron. So now, they're walking themselves into the neurons. As they're walking themselves into the neurons, your memory's going. As they're walking themselves into the neurons, you're getting Parkinson's. As you're walking into these neurons, you're struggling with all kinds of neurological symptoms. And that's what happens. More metal goes in. The metal deposits get bigger, and then they rub against neurons, and they start to dominate. And then the next part happens right there. The next part is the neurons get corroded. The metal corrodes, and the metal corrodes, and then it outgasses, and deposits come off of it, and that's next. I'll give you that quick rundown, because we got stuff to do. So here's your neurons right here. Bunch of neurons. right? There they are. We're stringing them all together. There they are. All that tissue. Okay? And then there's the metal. Here it is. A big old metal deposit. See it right here? A big old metal deposit right here. It's growing bigger and bigger. You got more metal coming in left and right from various places. More metals coming in. The deposit's getting bigger and bigger. And then what happens is that it pushes against these neurons. But worse, the metal starts to corrode. We're on these really high-fat diets. The high fat corrodes the metal more. We're getting more metal coming in, and then it starts to leach. It's like a leach field. These are your neurons here, and they start to become dirty. Your brain gets filthy inside because the metal starts to leach, and it starts to leach, outgas, and start to corrode. And as that metal's corroding, it's entering your neurons. See those beautiful blue neurons right there? There you go. Look at that. See? Those neurons are getting contaminated, right? There you are. And when that happens, you wake up one morning and you have a seizure or your first great panic attack or something else. You wake up and you just don't know who you are for a moment. It happens every time for so many people. All the time for a lot of people out there. We inhale metals, we eat metals, we breathe in metals, which is inhaling them. We get metals in our skin, we get metals in our bloodstream every single day, and metals circulate throughout our bloodstream every single day, and then they find a home. So when we eat toxic heavy metals, the metals go down into our stomach, they go down into our intestinal tract, and they stay there. They cling to the walls of the intestinal tract. They go up the highway that goes to the liver, the hepatic portal highway. The metals travel into the liver. The liver tries to filter the metals out, and then the metals get trapped inside the liver. When the metals get trapped inside the liver, they become food for, you know what? The bugs. The bugs. The bugs. As the metals are sitting inside the liver, so are bugs, and the bugs feed off of the metals, and next thing you know it, you got yourself some fatigue. You cannot explain. You don't understand the fatigue. You can't explain it. You don't know why you have it, but it's there. And it's just not a matter of you overworking or over-exercising or just even being stressed out. Fatigue that shouldn't be there sticks around because bugs inside the liver will feed off of those metals, and that will happen. Now, people get tested for metals now. It's something that's common since there's been so much awareness with the medical medium books all these years and information. So they're getting tested for metals. And a lot of doctors are like, well, you don't have really any metals in here. But what people don't realize is they're in the organs. Spleen, pancreas, liver, inside the stomach tissue, the stomach walls, intestinal tract walls. They're in the heart. Metals get into the heart muscle and they hide in there. They're in lung tissue. Metals are in the brain. Metals are in the spinal cord. Metals are in the central nervous system, and they sit in there. So when you test for metals, you don't really test that high in metal. Some people do because they're having recent exposures. The only way to find metals through testing and blood testing is a recent exposure that's happening on a daily or weekly basis. And when there's a recent exposure, then the blood you can find metals inside the blood. If there isn't a recent exposure of a high enough magnitude of enough, then it'll just sit deep inside the organs. I've been putting this information out there for decades. Finally, the blood labs are starting to admit this, that metals are sitting inside organs and they may not be detectable in the bloodstream, thanks to MMinfo.